Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to former Congressman Tom Perriello and Delegate Carlson, all of our speakers, and especially our partner, Jamie Lockhart at Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia, who are co-hosting this event with us today. My name is Katie Baker, and I'm here on behalf of Americans for Contraception. And we're on a bit of a victory tour this week as we are celebrating the passage and the upcoming July 1st effective date of the Virginia Right to Contraception Act. And what that law will do is it will codify a right to use and for doctors to prescribe FDA-approved forms of contraception. Those include condoms, IUDs, the pill, emergency contraceptives as well. And at the same time, we're pivoting to a larger goal, which is to pass the Federal Right to Contraception Act, and we are calling on Congressman John McGuire to help us in doing that. I do want to just take a step back and tell you a little bit more about the organization I represent. So Americans for Contraception is a national advocacy organization. We formed in 2022, shortly after the Dobbs decision came out that overturned Roe v. Wade. So obviously that decision was catastrophic for reproductive health care and abortion rights. But if you read further down into the opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote a concurrence in which he called on the court to reconsider Griswold v. Connecticut, which was the first case to establish a constitutional right to contraception next. And just last week was the anniversary of Griswold, so that coincides with the national tour that we're doing. We've got events in Alabama, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Wisconsin this week, in addition to Virginia. So we introduced a Federal Right to Contraception Act back in 2022. 195 House Republicans voted against it, but we did get some bipartisan support for it. And we knew we had to take action in the states if Congress was going to fail to act. So we've introduced bills in, I believe, 10 or 12 different states. We have had success in Nevada. That was the first state where we passed the Right to Contraception Act. And we kind of surprised ourselves by passing it in Tennessee. But the Republicans realized there that this was such a popular issue across party lines, and our polling shows it's an 8 and 10 issue or a 9 or 10 issue, that they realized it would be too politically toxic to oppose it. So they actually stole the bill from our patron, Gloria Johnson, and passed it themselves. It was a good bill. It was supported by Planned Parenthood down there. And so honestly, we were just happy to see it done. And then here in Virginia, we first introduced the right to contraception back in 2024 with then State Senator, now Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi, Delegate Marcia Price, and since Lieutenant Governor ascended into her current role, Senator Jennifer Carroll Foy has taken up that mantle, gotten that bill across the finish line and to the governor's desk who signed it. So we were very excited about that. We have been to Charlottesville. I believe this is now the fourth, I was looking back at my files, the fourth Contraception Act that we have done here in Charlottesville. We first came, I think the first one we did, it was with Lieutenant Governor Hashmi and you, Delegate. We did it over at Quirk Hotel, and we just kept coming back. And most recently, we were back on the UVA campus last year with a 20-foot inflatable IUD in partnership with Planned Parenthood. So with that, I'm just so excited to introduce Jamie Lockhart. Jamie is always one to go on the road with me. She has been to Williamsburg, Blacksburg. We were just in Tappahannock last month. We've been to Harrisonburg. Excited to be back in Charlottesville today. And with that, I'll introduce my colleague, Jamie Lockhart. Jamie.
Thank you so much, Katie. As she said, I'm Jamie Lockhart, Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia, and it's an honor to be here in partnership with Americans for Contraception, former Congressman Tom Perriello, Delegate Carlson, and a number of partners. And you also just brought back memories in front of Frida, so also glad to be back here in Charlottesville. The freedom to decide if and when to grow your family and whether to use an IUD, an implant, a condom or pills is a deeply personal one. It's a decision people deserve to make based on their own circumstances, priorities, and desires, without interference from politicians whose actions are based on ideology and not evidence. It's a decision that, as we all know too well, is increasingly at risk. In the wake of the fall of Roe v. Wade, policymakers across the country are advancing measures that restrict access to essential health care, including birth control, and target trusted providers like Planned Parenthood. Last year, President Trump and Republicans in Congress passed the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, which, as we all know, is anything but. This included a provision to block Medicaid recipients from using their health insurance at Planned Parenthood healthcare centers. In Virginia, that has meant sharp declines in essential preventive care services like breast exams, Pap test, cancer screenings, HPV test, and more. For example, the Virginia League for Planned Parenthood, one of the Planned Parenthood affiliates in Virginia, they saw these tests all down more than 40% from the fourth quarter of 2024 to the fourth quarter of 2025. Planned Parenthood health centers play a critical role in allowing patients to access vital services, including birth control. And let's be clear, these legislative attacks are not and have never been just about abortion. Anti-rights groups are coming from birth control, they're coming for LGBTQ plus rights, and they're also coming for IVF too. In Virginia, our legislators passed and our governor signed a historic package of legislation that protects our rights and expands access to the birth control of our choice on our terms. This is a bold statement showing that Virginia will not back down in the face of challenges to our freedoms. It's time for these protections to advance at the federal level too. Millions across our nation rely on birth control, not just a means of family planning, but as essential health care. It's not a nice to have, it's necessary for people's lives and futures. I urge our members of Congress, including my own Congressman Rob Whitman, and Charlottesville's Congressman John McGuire, to sign this discharge petition and move the federal right to contraception to a vote. We do not have time to waste when it comes to protecting people's lives. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. She represents the 54th District in the Virginia House of Delegates. She's a champion for reproductive health care, for criminal justice reform, for education, Delegate Katrina Carlson.
Hi everyone. I am so glad to be here because I do remember coming to the first press conference, and I remember at that one just being kind of in shock, like how is this an issue? This can't be an issue. Clearly we all should access contraception. And then I remember that getting vetoed and coming to the next one with a little more anger, especially after I'd heard testimony where people actually had spoken up about denying people contraception. And I took it a lot more seriously, that no, we absolutely need to speak up for this. I apparently missed the one with the floaty, so I should have, and I don't, the inflatable, so maybe I should have come to that one. But I'm really glad to be at this one today because I know now that we have passed it, that it is being signed into law, and that it is going to go into effect and protect women here in Virginia. So with that, I'm going to launch in. I was happy and proud to be a co-patron to help pass the Virginia Right to Contraception Act. And it was done at a time when we know that nothing was off of the table. We saw it with the fall of Roe v. Wade, and I was proud, as I just explained, to take action at the state level to safeguard our rights. Everyone deserves the right to contraception in Virginia, regardless of whether you are in deep blue cities like Charlottesville or red cities, counties like Wise. Contraception isn't just for family planning. We heard it from Jamie. It's meant to manage a myriad of conditions, including polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is what the patron of the bill, my colleague Delegate Sia Price, has spoken powerfully about managing through the use of an IUD. No matter what your reason, because you don't have to give your reasons, no matter what your reason for using contraception, nobody should infringe upon your right to access the health care you need and deserve. And after that first press conference that I talked about, I reached out to members of my community, and I know that there are many that feel the same way about the issue. In particular, there was a story I shared at that press conference of a friend, a very close friend, who told me when I was telling her we're voting on the right to contraception, that her mother had 11 children. She had been denied the right to contraception, and she, the daughter, attributed her mother's untimely death and health conditions, declining health, to the fact that she was unable to access contraception. So it is not, that story was powerful to me for a few reasons. One, it was a powerful reminder that this is not a story far in our past. This isn't something that can't be imagined. We know that it happened. It's happened to people that are alive right now who were denied contraception when they were my age or younger. Secondly, it illustrates the real consequences when you don't allow people access to contraception. So, while I am proud that Virginia continues to be a leader in the South by passing this act, I know that many of our other southern states have not done so. Although I was pleased to hear that Tennessee has, so that's pretty great. I would not have expected that, but good for Tennessee. But we can do more than that. We can go to the national level. It's why it's important that we ask and we tell Congress to follow our lead, happy to lead the way, by passing the Federal Right to Contraception Act. It would enshrine this protection for every American. Congressman McGuire has an opportunity to sign on to this discharge petition, or he can show the community how out of touch he is with our values and our needs. So I'm proud to be in this fight with you. Thank you for having me. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Delegate. And I just wanted to build off of a couple things that you said that you reminded me of. One, our patron Delegate Price has been such a champion. Along with, I wanted to shout out Senator Creedeeds and Delegate Amy Wofford, who have been champions as well, but just weren't able to make it today. And one of the things that Delegate Price said on the floor of the House of Delegates, and she was addressing her colleagues directly, when she said it really wasn't that long ago before Griswold v. Connecticut existed and guaranteed the right to contraception. In fact, it was in some of y'all's lifetimes. And I think it's really important. I think it's easy to forget that this is something that we take for granted. And with that, I want to root our conversation a little bit in the perspective of someone who can speak a little bit to a time not that long ago before the right to contraception was guaranteed in Virginia, and that is Penny Blue. Penny, who's been on the road with us all week on our tour.
Yes. So thank you for having me this morning. And as Katie was saying, and I didn't realize this until a couple of years ago when I started working with Katie and now Lieutenant Governor Hashmi, who then was Senator Hashmi, that this bill didn't pass, or the right to have a contraception did not pass until 1965. So not telling my age, but yes, I was born before 1965. Also, just about over a year ago, when I was traveling across Virginia speaking with different women about contraception, I then realized that nearly every person has a contraception story. And my contraception story is about my mother and the community that I grew up in, because I'm number 9 of 10 children. I was born and raised in Franklin County, where large families like mine was common. I actually know families with 13 and 21 children. And even though I know that my mother loved each and every one of her children, because I received that love, from the time that she was 18 till she was 45, she was having children. And as our delegate said, the toll that actually takes on a person's body. So I'm certain, as I said, I'm certain my mother loved each and every one of her children and the family that she was able to create with my dad. However, I personally witnessed her joy that she felt when her 7 daughters were able to be independent because they could make the decisions with regard to their contraception. So now I ask Congressman McGuire, along with my Congressman Morgan Griffin, and all of Congress to please follow Virginia's lead and support and pass the federal right to contraception. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Penny. And Penny has been with us since the beginning as well. And I was delighted she told me yes and traveling with me all week. We were in Harrisonburg and Roanoke last week we're going to Northern Virginia tomorrow. So just happy to have you on the road with us, Penny. And with that, I'm excited to introduce someone who has also been with us the whole time, and that is Vic Bermudez, who represents Whole Women's Health Alliance, which is based here in Charlottesville. Vic.
First and foremost, thank you for the invitation to speak. Thank you for everybody joining us, from advocates to providers, organizers, community members. Day in and day out, our dedication to care and justice has brought us to this moment and will continue to push us forward together. As Katie mentioned, my name is Vic Bermudez. I serve as the Senior Advocacy Manager with Whole Women's Health Alliance. We are a nonprofit that sits at the center of direct services and advocacy. Daily, we serve patients through our virtual care and in our brick and mortar clinics, one of which is just a couple of minutes away from where we stand today. We take a moment to celebrate the passage of this legislation that ensures decisions are in the right hands, those of providers and patients. I stand here carrying the stories of our patients with me, the story of the mother of 3 seeking contraception after an abortion to ensure that the family that she has can continue to be provided for, the patient seeking care to ensure they do not have to be bedridden with every single menstrual cycle, the patient accessing contraception so that they do not feel the weight of gender dysphoria. Whether you are using contraception to prevent pregnancy, manage acne, regulate periods, treat conditions like endometriosis, PMDD, PMOS, formerly PCOS, or as gender-affirming care, contraception is life-saving. We also recognize that there is a lot of work that still needs to be done because everyone deserves access to the full range of reproductive health care, regardless of what state they live in, their race, immigration status, income, age, gender identity. Today is not the first win that we celebrate, nor will it be the last. We stand here as part of a larger legacy of a fight dating back centuries, all united by a common belief that we have a fundamental right to autonomy and a life that is so much more than just surviving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vic. And I usually don't like to share my own stories at these types of events, but since I don't have a storyteller today who's going to speak directly to how contraception can be used to treat other health conditions, I'll just, I think about contraception a lot as an economic issue. A lot of people don't have children either because they can't afford them or because they want to build economic power. As I have, and to me, contraception has allowed me to run a business and do this advocacy work without the fear of pregnancy. But it also helps me to show up as my best self at work. I have always suffered since I was 11 years old from very difficult periods. And I was just thinking last week when I was on the road going to all these events in Harrisonburg and in Roanoke, I would have powered through them, but I would have been in a lot of pain. I would have lacked the focus that everyone in this room deserves. I would have been very tired, and I probably would have been pretty grouchy, and you all wouldn't have wanted to be around me. So that's really what contraception and access to that has meant to me in my own life. And I know I represent the stories of thousands, millions of women and non-binary folks in Virginia in sharing that story. And I've learned a lot about how contraception can be used to treat other health conditions through doing this work, including perimenopause. I didn't know there was a World Menopause Day. So we also came to Charlottesville to do an event around that. I really appreciated how Penny's story grounded us in the past, but I want to introduce our next speaker, who's going to be a little bit more forward-looking. And that is Abby Garber, who is a student at UVA. Abby.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to Americans for Contraception for inviting me. My name is Abby Garber, and I am a 21-year-old rising fourth year at the University of Virginia, Wahoo Wah. Today, I am here demanding that our congressman here in Charlottesville, Representative John McGuire, sign a discharge petition to force a floor vote on the bill to codify a federal right to use contraception. While I'm grateful that Virginia has enshrined this vital right, all Americans deserve the right to contraception, and Representative John McGuire must protect his constituents and enshrine the federal right to contraception. As a young person, my future is the most precious thing to me. And while I'm not sure what that includes yet, I know that I need choices. I want to choose what job I pursue, what pet I get first, and most critically, when I start a family. But for so many of my friends, contraception goes beyond family planning. It's critical medication for PCOS, endometriosis, and so many other chronic diseases. This legislation would protect so many at a time when everyone is becoming increasingly vulnerable as Republicans continue to roll back our rights. We aren't imagining these threats. They're all too real. Justice Clarence Thomas has openly asked for the Supreme Court to look at contraception after they overturned Roe. Americans deserve this proactive legislation that will shield us from national attacks. Representative John McGuire has no excuses left for why he won't support this legislation and stand with Americans, especially because 9 out of 10 Americans, including Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, support the right to contraception because it is fundamental. Tennessee, a very conservative state, like mentioned before, recognized this and passed their own Right to Contraception Act. Furthermore, 99% of women use it, and increasing access is critical in our community. I hope Representative John McGuire understands that young people notice his refusal to protect us in the onslaught of national attacks. My future and the future of countless other young people are at stake. I'm asking Representative John McGuire to find the courage within himself to stand with his constituents and ensure that the right to contraception is federally enshrined once and for all by signing the discharge petition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby. And I just wanted to build off of a couple things you said. You spoke to the threats with our rights being continued to be rolled back. And one thing we found when we first did polling on this issue back in 2022, the good news was the broad bipartisan support just across party lines. It was a winning issue, 8 and 10 issue, 9 and 10 issue, I believe. But we also found that there was a believability hurdle. So people didn't actually believe that the right to contraception was under threat. And so we, even post-Dobbs. So we tried to overcome that by talking a lot about that Griswold decision and the Dobbs decision and the concurrence in there with the explicit threat to Griswold, because they've told us what they want to do. Like, they're not hiding that football. And in fact, Donald Trump said on the campaign trail that he would be looking at restrictions on contraception. And we found the first year we ran the bill, Republicans in the state legislature were saying, oh, there's not really a threat to contraception. And then they all voted against it. Mm-hmm. And then, so we were able to, we did have a couple Republican votes. And so we were able to use that to say the fact that you would even vote against it is testament to why we need it. But then we started seeing more attacks from the Trump administration. And so I do think people are starting to get attuned to that news and are recognizing that contraception, as Jamie said, is the next front. So we've seen HHS federally issue guidance that elevates period tracking and natural family planning methods over more effective FDA-approved forms of contraception, which I think is a shift away from contraception toward conception. And after the president dismantled USAID, there were about $10 million worth of contraceptives left over that were intended to go to Africa. I believe they were mostly IUDs. And the administration went on the record and justified their intent to destroy those devices and inaccurately called them abortifacients. So the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists would tell you that IUDs and emergency contraceptives do not by definition cause abortion, but that is a false talking point that we've run into both here in Virginia and that we're hearing from the Trump administration. And then as Jamie spoke to, the biggest attack is on access with that passage of the big ugly law that's going to kick 350,000 people off their health care between Medicaid and the expiration of the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And if you lose your health insurance, you lose your access to contraception. And then obviously the attacks Jamie spoke to on Planned Parenthood. And there is, I guess I want to end before I introduce the former congressman. There is, I would say a ray of hope in changing hearts and changing minds. For Congressman McGuire, before he was in Congress, he served in the General Assembly where he did vote against the Virginia Right to Contraception Act, and he does deserve to be held accountable for that. But I would say something that was interesting that evolved as we were working on the bill over the years was that a couple of our most vocal opponents who spoke against the bill, including Senator David Suderline down from the Roanoke area, who spoke against the bill on the floor, Senator Danny Diggs from Hampton Roads, who was on the record as opposing the bill and stating things that were false about the bill. By the time we finally passed it and sent it to Governor Spanberger's desk, they actually voted for it. So that is the power of advocacy. And we will continue to be strong advocates. And with that, it is my honor to introduce a champion of reproductive health care and contraception, and that is former Congressman Tom Perriello.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you so much to everybody here, to Americans for Contraception, Planned Parenthood, Whole Woman's Health, and these just incredibly courageous advocates. Delegate Carlson, thank you for being a hero to this community in so many ways, including protecting our freedoms and protecting our access to contraception. This actually should be a very quick press conference. All John McGuire has to do is sign the discharge petition. People in this district want common sense and they want bipartisan solutions. There is bipartisan support for access to contraception. There is bipartisan support for a right to privacy, which is at threat. McGuire again and again goes from being the "don't tread on me" Freedom Caucus to the "please tread on me" with all the powers that you possibly can. This is not a popular position on right, left, and center. And let's look at what Congressman McGuire is doing in his attack on families, and particularly rural families. He's saying, I don't want you to have access to contraception. If you get pregnant, I don't want you to have access to pre- and postnatal care. He's voted to shut down the labor and delivery units in town. And then the only solution is to be the only person, Republican or Democrat, to say, well, we should just let kids get married. These are not credible solutions to the problems that we have. We do have real serious problems in our communities of how we're going to fix the healthcare system. So let's take care of the ones that should bring us together and should be solved in the stroke of a pen. John McGuire had the chance, with the stroke of a pen, to release the Epstein files. He didn't have the guts to do it. Right now, he has a chance to support this right to contraception for all over the country. We need to start solving the problems that bring us together so that we can come together on the problems that are harder to solve. This is a serious issue in our communities at every level of the healthcare system. Congressman McGuire, as the report came out 2 weeks ago, the vote for the big ugly bill has put hospitals and clinics across this district and across the state at risk. It is one of the number one issues I hear from young people who are thinking about whether they can start a family. Can they afford it? And will they have access to pre- and postnatal care? So we have a choice between leaders like the delegate who are protecting our rights and freedoms, people who are expanding access not just to contraception, but to maternal health in an area where 6 or 7 of our counties have lost their last OBGYN. So let's get this federal right recognized on the books, and then let's come together to figure out how we can make sure that every woman can access the care that they need and deserve to have a family at the time they choose to do so. So thank you for letting me be part of this today.
Thank you so much, former Congressman. And I think I was remiss in just talking a little bit, if press have questions about the mechanics of a discharge petition. So a discharge petition is a mechanism to force a full vote on the House floor in the event that Republican leadership and Speaker Mike Johnson will not let that legislation get through the committee process. So Congress did it with the Epstein files, they did it with the Affordable Care Act tax credits. We think that we can do it with the Right to Contraception Act. Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher from Texas announced last week that she was going to be pushing this discharge petition. We kicked off the tour with a press call with Congresswoman McClellan, calling on all her colleagues to sign on to it. I think it depends on vacancies. We need to get to 218, but if we can get every Democrat on there, I think it's somewhere between 2 and 5 Republican signatures that we'll need. And we had 8 Republicans vote with us last time for the bill. They're not all still there, but it's still a pretty narrow threshold. So I do think it's something that's doable and that we can get over to force this vote and really force every member of the U.S. House of Representatives to say whether or not they stand with the right to contraception. So with that, I want to thank all of our speakers, especially the folks who have gone on the road with us, former Congressman Tom Perriello, Delegate Carlson, Planned Parenthood, our co-host. Did you have any final thoughts?
No.
All right. So instead of taking questions for the podium, I think several of our speakers are willing to do one-on-ones if you have questions. So we would be happy to accommodate that if any press are interested in talking to any of our speakers. And with that, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Randy?